All right, welcome back to Lindroth Hockey Podcast. We're in partnership with Black and Gold Hockey Productions. You're here with co-host, father and son duo, Andrew and Jim Lindroth. Dad, how you doing today?
Doing great, Andrew. Excited for this guest. You actually booked this guest, which is great.
Yep.
But I love it because we're going to talk everything about coaching and all the behind-the-scenes video stuff and everything else. So this is going to be a great insider info on the fascinating coaching aspects of hockey. So hit the intro.
Yeah, man. So today we're excited to have with a special guest, TJ Millar. So in his younger years, TJ played in the AJHL and other junior leagues, including a professional stint in 2013-2014, but quickly transitioned over to coaching and development the following year in Sweden. TJ later returned back to North America as video coach for the Tri-City Americans of the WHL. And then from 2016 to 2021 was assistant coach first in the SJHL and then later in the AJHL. Last season, TJ was hired by the Maple Leafs organization where he was development coach associate for the AHL and ECHL affiliate. Now this year, he has returned back to the Tri-City Americans as an associate coach, and we're excited to hit the ground running, Dad, like you said, and get all the inside scoop about coaching. So TJ, thanks for joining us today, man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you guys very much. Really happy to be here.
So TJ, I know that that was probably a blast in the past talking about everything, including some of the old playing days in Sweden. So I kind of want to start with that, playing in those junior leagues in Canada, and then we'll transition over to Sweden. So can you talk a little bit about the AJHL and the other leagues over in Canada?
Yeah, so for me, that was over 10 years ago now. I was just a young guy. I played my minor hockey in Calgary. I'm born and raised there. And, I grew up like everyone else, loving playing around the rink. I had a very supportive family that gave me and presented me with a lot of opportunities to continue my passion to play the game up until I was 18. And at that time, if you look me up, I don't have dazzling stats. I don't have a star-studded career. I just love to play the game, and I wanted to see where it took me. My 18-year-old season, I played a few games of Junior A in Alberta with the Calgary Canucks. It was right in my hometown, so I was right at home. It was pretty comfortable, and I got cut. So I had an opportunity to play Junior B with some of my friends out in Columbia Valley in the Kootenay International League. And I found myself at a little bit of a crossroads. The playing thing for me at that point in time wasn't really going the way I had planned. So I ultimately made the decision to transition into looking to do something else. So midway through the season, I went into my coach, Wade Dublowitz, former New York Islanders goaltender, who I actually consider a really good friend of mine to this day. And I said, hey, look, man, I think I got to do something else here. I just don't know if I have the same passion that I used to. So I went home for a few months. For a few years leading up to that point, I was a lead instructor and a junior instructor with Hockey Canada. And I had some really good mentors. And one guy I wanted to reach out to at this point was Ross McLean. And with the support of my father, we had learned about this program in Finland. It was a program that was specialized in ice hockey coaching, where you got a bachelor's degree in sport and leisure management. It was a program funded and created by the IIHF, where they wanted to produce hockey coaches for their member national associations. And for someone like me, there was a little tinkering back and forth, trying to figure out what they wanted to do, whether it was to go to school and pursue a business degree, or did I have an opportunity to stay inside the game. I found an opportunity to stay in. I loved it. I didn't see myself taking that, corporate world route. I wanted to stay involved in the game and try my hack at coaching or scouting, whatever it might have been. So I took a shot. I applied to go study at the Välimäki campus, and I was a lucky guy that was fortunate enough to get accepted. And at 19 years old, I was moving across the world to start my post-secondary degree. My first season was a little bit of a roller coaster, being a young guy that moved across the pond. Obviously, where English isn't your first language, you're going with people that you don't know, people from all over the world. And I was really fortunate to have an opportunity to play at the under 20 level my first year there. So that really gave me a lot of perspective outside of the Canadian norm of hockey, getting a firsthand look at how the Finnish Ice Hockey Federation, or the Finnish Ice Hockey Association, administers their teachings and their protocols. And I was right in there firsthand. Like I was being coached in Finnish. You talk about being a wide-eyed teenager, and it's like you pick things up really quick. And it was a really pivotal time for me, because I thought I was forced to grow up fast. And it's actually funny, going into this podcast, reflecting on the last 10 years of my life, I thought it was a really important decision that I made at that time, and I believe it was the right one. I have been fortunate over the last 10 years to be surrounded by so many people in so many different situations. It's gone by quick, but I've learned a lot, and I've really enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so growing up in Canada, we've heard that obviously there's a lot of pressure if you want to become a pro hockey player, if that's your dream, that there are certain routes that you take. Sometimes maybe not go to college right away. You can always do that later. You go the major junior route. You were kind of talking about the route you were going. So for coaching, was there a specific route you're pressured into? I know that you had the opportunities that fell right in place, or was it just like, no, this is the one way I want to do it?
Right. For me, when I was coming out of university, I as a kid, being from Calgary with the Calgary Hitmen and everything, I had a deep, strong passion for the Western Hockey League. I just think it's such a great league with how they produce players, and obviously the international attention that they get with the strong European strength of players that they get as well. It was just something I've always followed in my teenage years. And when I had an opportunity to come to the Tri-City Americans on what was slated as an internship coming out of university, I took it as an opportunity for me to get my foot in the door in the North American coaching stream. At the beginning of my career, I thought video or a scouting role was something that I was going to be, rolling with and going for. Because at that time, I was always hampered on the fact that, you didn't play. How could you coach? But for me, I was under the impression that, that didn't matter. I was a passionate guy. I took my time going through my opportunities, and I just wanted to make sure I was surrounded by people that were going to give me opportunities to learn. So when I had come back to the Tri-City Americans, I took this opportunity as a quote unquote intern and had the opportunity to work with Mike Williamson and Brian Pellerin in my first year. And they gave me a lot of responsibility. There were only 2 coaches on the staff. So for me, given that opportunity at such an early age, basically the same age as the players, I was 21, it really showed me that, there was an opportunity here.
So a lot of younger guys would have some international experience via under 16, under whatever international play, but you were actually over there in Finland for a while. Do you remember what was one or two of the big major things being a Western Canada guy to now you're over learning that sort of Swedish Finnish style play? Anything that was eye-opening to you at that time?
The one thing I thought was rather eye-opening for me, and it goes into some of my studies as well as it goes into my work with the under 15 Finnish national team when I was there, was they preached a lot of athlete-centered coaching. My student-based curriculum was rather unique. One of the first couple of days when we're sitting in the classroom, we had a guy by the name of Kari Savalainen sit in with us, and he asked us, "What do you guys want to get out of this program? What do you want to learn? Is it the discipline of coaching? Is it the game management, bench management, practice planning and execution? Is it recruiting tactics? Is it overall philosophies of coaching and just open discussions?" So actually over the course of a couple hours, we as students created our curriculum over the next few years, and they built a curriculum and they built the schedule based around what we wanted to get out of it. And I learned that a couple weeks later, when I was playing for the under 20 team in the nearby region, our coach handed us the whiteboard and said, "Here, you guys run the power play, I'll mediate it and see what kind of adjustments we can make, and we can come to a conclusion here." One of the things that I really took away from that was, at the end of the day, in some regard, it's a game that's played by the players on the ice. You give them the tools, you give them the habits and the details. Inevitably, they're the ones that are putting the puck in the net. They're the ones that are going through the routes. They're the ones that are executing. So with that mindset, I believe that it really empowers your players. And I've taken a lot of that into my technique in coaching and dealing with athletes and people, in a sense of making sure that they're feeling like they're contributing towards their development. And to me, I know I'm kind of going on a long rant on one tactic here, but I think it's all encompassing of how they're doing such a great job in developing players. I mean, they also do a phenomenal job with their grassroots, building from the ground up with their overall technical skills and skating, and the opportunity for them to be on the ice at a large amount of time. And, they do a really good job putting a lot of emphasis on development, and it's really great. I was very fortunate to be there.
That's very interesting. So after that time there, you do return to North America, this time in the USA and with the Tri-City Americans as a video coach. Well, my first question is, first time living in America, right? How was that for you as a young guy? Especially moving from over the pond back to here, another new country.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have traveled a lot in my time. And by the time I'd come there, I was put in a billet family. So I was actually living with Dennis and Margaret Lohman, who are, some of them are minority owners with the franchise. And they treated me as their own. I was fortunate enough to be a little self-sufficient at that time. So getting in and around. But, when I was here that first time, when I was so young, I just wanted to make it a priority just to put my head down at work. you know, as the video coach, I was responsible for a lot of the pre-scouts and putting together all the clips in the video. So I took it upon myself to spend a lot of time preparing the coaches so that when we were ready, you know, all the information was there and provided for the coaches to do their work. So for me, it was great. The year went by quick. We unfortunately missed the playoffs, but what a great opportunity in my first year.
So it seems like today, and again, I'm talking with no experience at all, but it seems like today, learning the fine art of, like you said, developing the pre-scouting, developing, development, right? Technical skills on players. You might be working not just on certain special teams, but it's individual players and going over tape and things that they could improve on. It seems like that's now a necessary thing if you plan on having a career as some sort of coach. Yes?
Yeah, 100%. You know, players nowadays, and I'm sure you guys have heard this before, players want information. They want as much assistance or guidance through their own play that is going to help them get to where they want to get to, whether it's the NHL or some kind of pro level overseas or minor league pro or to college. They want information, but they also want to know the why. And I've come to find that video is a very useful tool to support your case, but it also opens up for a really good exchange of dialogue, which helps build relationships with your players. If you're talking about, let's just say something as simple as scoring chance, and you have a perspective on a player, maybe he can go to his backhand here, but your player sees it another way. It opens the dialogue so that you're both learning from one another. And for me, I have found that the open communication or opening that aspect of it with your players, the video just really helps it. And it also helps coaches, you know, deliver meetings and shows reasoning, and it can even enhance buy-in if you're showing positive clips towards your group. I just think it's such an important tool. And as we've seen with technology today, it's becoming more and more advanced. The amount of layers that come inside of video, even as far as how fast the players are skating, how fast the puck is being moved, it really comes into a lot of decision making too with your roster and your tactical assessment of your group. And it's just something that we at least in Tri-Cities, we rely upon it quite significantly.
So, you know, you hear guys like Tortorella who hate the iPad thing and players viewing their shifts right after they're done doing it. Do you think that that's something that is actually useful? I know that video coaching, it's all like after pre-scouting and stuff like that, but especially during a game, do you think sometimes if they screwed up or did something and they're trying to look and they get frustrated, do you sometimes think it's smart to take the iPad away? No, or is that helpful?
It's a really interesting question because I myself am finding, I think that there's a time or a place for the iPad on the bench. I would lean more so towards a special teams scenario, more so than a 5-on-5. Sometimes I feel as though when you're looking at 5-on-5 play, at least, sometimes it matters more about what you're doing as a team versus what the opposition is or how you can try and get that chance. Odds are that scoring chance may not happen for that game or maybe not even the next game, but it's just a matter of just getting back to work, keep doing the things that are making us successful as a group. And, you know, at the end of the day, video will be there moving forward, but in game, we can stick that for special teams.
I want to jump ahead, Andrew.
Yeah.
You can go back if you want.
For
but
sure.
I think it's all going to meld together here. So you pick up with the Maple Leaf organization as a developmental coach. And at the time, who were the affiliates for the AHL and the East Coast League?
Yeah, so my time with the Maple Leaf organization, I actually spent all time with all three teams in the organization. So I spent a chunk of time with the Maple Leafs, I spent time with the Marlies in Toronto in the American Hockey League, and then I spent some time in St. John's, Newfoundland, with the Newfoundland Growlers in the ECHL.
Oh,
Newfoundland.
Newfoundland. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
How was that traveling all the way to Newfoundland every time? I mean, when we heard,
Newfoundland.
yeah, I can't say it right, but when they were doing the finals those years ago,
Yeah,
before
they gotta
Tulsa made,
fly,
they
yeah.
had to fly. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, you know, the Growlers organization treated me unbelievably. You know, the entire Maple Leaf organization treated me unbelievably. And, you know, my time spent with the Growlers, it was unreal. You know, I was fortunate to spend the first 4 games of the regular season there, I was in Trois-Rivières for the first game in franchise history. We went down to Adirondack and played the Thunder there. So it was, you know, they do tell you stories about the long bus rides. There's some long bus rides in that league. And when we were in the playoffs, we were playing Reading, and we flew to Toronto, we bussed down to Philly, and then landed in Reading for the playoff series. So we got a firsthand experience of what that bus travel is like. But no, it's great. Second to none operation there. They treat their players, they treat their staff with so much respect and so much dignity. They're great over there.
So the Marlies is such a storied, you know, franchise in the American League. Are you in a little bit of, I mean, it's a gig, it's a job, it's the business of hockey, it is what it is, but there's also that, I mean, it's the Marlies, man, right? Or even in Toronto, I mean, no matter what it is there a little bit of a sense of awe when you're just like, I'm working with the Toronto Marlies?
Yeah. I mean, my landing of the position with the Maple Leaf organization was a little bit of an oddity, and it came out late in a sense that I got the job in late August, and I flew from Calgary to Toronto on a whim, and the very first day I got there, I'm on the ice with half the Maple Leafs players, and spending some time with them, and there's no surprise that those guys are playing at the level that they're playing at. The skill sets that they have, the detail, the determination they have to be at their very best and consistently be at their very best. And, working with Greg Moore and his staff, and even with Sheldon Keefe and his staff, like the players that they have there are second to none. Some of the best players in the world are within that organization. Early on, I definitely found myself to be very wide-eyed. And, not very often are you around guys like that. At least in my coaching experience, I've been around guys from time to time, but to be with those guys every single day, you learn to appreciate even beyond what I thought was a level of appreciation for what they do every single day. And then it was time to get to work, for a little bit, but then it's like, okay, they're players, they want to get better, they have goals in mind, same as me, let's work together, let's accomplish something great. And that's what that year last year ended up being.
So is there a blueprint for moving up as a coach? Because you were video coach, assistant, developmental, now this year associate coach. Is there, like, do you have to do all those jobs to move up, or is there a specific position? Like, I'm just curious of the roadmap that you have to get to. If, like, let's say you want to become an assistant or a head coach in the AHL or NHL, is there a blueprint at all, or is it just people like, how do you get up there?
I believe everyone's path is different. Looking on my path, my path took me from Finland to the US to Nipawin, Saskatchewan to Bonneville, kind of went all over. I mean, for me, I firmly believe that as a coach, it's important to put yourself in a situation to learn, to grow, and obviously to get better. For me, since I started out so young, I was of the impression that never be in a rush to get somewhere. Be where you are, be present. And as my father always says, he says, be in the now, because moments are going to pass you by. You might miss an opportunity to learn something. And when the right opportunity comes, well, you better be sure that you're ready for it. But I don't think, there are guys who create 5-year, 10-year plans. And, early on, I thought, okay, 10-year plan, I'll be 30, 10 years, by 30, I want to be a head coach. I need to be a head coach. But, I found sometimes that actually limited me.
Yeah.
Because I might have oversaw some details, or might have missed something that would, prevent me from having success in my current position. But for other people, I just always say, just don't rush it. Take the time, assess and analyze where you are and where you want to get to, and make sure you're just taking the necessary steps to learn, to ask questions, and obviously grow your network so that you can rely upon other opinions that'll help you get what you want out of the sport.
So as a developmental coach, I'll ask, for us, but definitely for the fans, because I think we know, what do you do? Is it working special teams? Is it working individuals? Are you assigned certain individuals? I know that's a lot of questions, but I'd be like, if I'm a player and you go, hey man, I've been assigned to you, to help you with such and such. Am I thinking, oh man, I'm in bad shape?
Right. Yeah.
So I guess I'll touch on my role with the Leafs and a little bit of a backstory. So my role as a coaching development associate was a position that was created by the Maple Leafs that was targeting ethnic and minority groups with hope of, creating exposure and opportunities for diverse coaches. And within that role, they wanted to create and give hands-on experiences with all three teams in their organization. So to give you a little bit of a backstory, starting with the Maple Leafs, while I was working with the Maple Leafs, I was responsible from the video side of things. I was able to work on the 5-on-5 pre-scouts for the coaching staff. So I would present 5-on-5 pre-scouts for our upcoming opponents that I was assigned. And I had a little bit of a make-it moment when we were in Calgary playing the hometown Flames of mine. I had the opportunity to run the team meeting actually and present to the players,
nice.
Which was, for me, that was the highlight of my coaching career to date. Now we lost the game, but to say that I ran the meeting, I mean, I'm very, very proud of that. you know, I was able to work with the development staff and work with players as far as their skill development, and, you know, transitioning over to the Marlies. You know, I actually got into a few games on the bench with the Marlies. You know, I think I was on the bench for about 6 or 7 games. So I got firsthand bench coaching in the American Hockey League, you know, primarily working with the forwards, you know, giving them that feedback and that, you know, analytics and whatever they needed at the bench at that time, assisting with practices, and again, sticking with that development stuff, working with the development team and the players, and again, developing them. And then lastly, with the Growlers, you know, Eric Wellwood and his staff gave me a ton. You know, I was on the bench for every game that I was present for with the Growlers. Obviously, going on the playoff run that we did against Florida in the Eastern Conference Final, I was a part of that. I had the opportunity to run the face-offs and just, again, be fully immersed in how the Maple Leaf organization ran things. And one of the things when I'm looking back on it in my position, I was fortunate enough to spend so much time with all 3 teams. I was able to build relationships with the players. In case in point, the players that were transitioning between, whether it was the Marlies and the Leafs or the Marlies and the Growlers. And I took it as a real positive that, you know, the players, when they're transitioning or they're getting called up or they're getting reassigned, that they had a familiar face. And especially for the younger guys that might be new to pro hockey that were coming in and out, and if I was there with them, they at least had a little bit of a familiarity that they could easily adjust to the new team that they're with after X amount of time away. So I thought that was a real positive. And it was a tremendous year that went by really fast. I believe I had 3 seasons in one between the NHL, American League, and the ECHL.
No
It was a lot of traveling, not a lot of off days. My off days were often transition days from team to team. So I would spend my Sundays watching all the Marley games I missed, or rewatching all the Leaf games that I might have missed. So the next morning, I was ready to answer any and all questions about the players or how the team was looking. So it was an unbelievable experience. And yeah.
So over the years that you were assistant coach, whether it was, you know, with Tri-City Americans this year as associate coach, or in the AJHL, SJHL before, what do you consider, and I'm sure you have to be well-rounded, but what would you consider as your strongest position as far as coaching? Is it penalty kill, power play, offense, defense? If you, I guess, had to pick one, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think I know well-rounded would be very cliche, but if I have to say anything, I think the creation. I mean, everybody loves offense. You know, there's a gentleman I've worked with in the past that says he doesn't talk about defense till after 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So defense can go by the wayside for now. But I think creating scoring chances and opportunities from the defense and the offense, I just believe that there's so much opportunity with players. And, you know, I believe obviously you get the most out of your players when you talk about offense, because everybody wants to score goals. You know, with my roles and responsibilities here in Tri-Cities, not only am I trying to generate opportunities off of face-off structure, but how can we keep plays alive in the offensive zone, whether it's playing on the end wall or changing the point of attack from behind the net. You know, looking at those little details are things that really excite me lately. And how can we get our D-men involved in creating those scoring opportunities when pucks get to the top? So I think it's kind of evolved. You know, when I was a younger coach, I really worked on the defensive side of things, working with the D-men, their skills and their development, working on the penalty kill and how to keep goals out of the net. And I feel like over the last few years, it's transitioned on how are we going to put pucks into the net. So I'm going to go with offense here.
So were there any major differences when you finally went over to the Maple Leafs organization, coaching and doing your thing in the AHL, NHL? Was there any major differences compared to the AJHL, SJHL, any of those? I mean, I'm sure there is with the pros, but like as far as the X's and O's goes, how the game is played?
I find at the junior level that the structure is much different team by team, whereas in the NHL, I find a lot of the structure is quite similar. You know, whether you're going team by team, everybody has their little adjustments and their little differences with how they might defend or what their triggers might be on their special teams. But I find a lot of it to be very similar, and that's when you see the skill set really take over.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So a couple coaching questions here, particularly dealing with, you know, the younger players, so dealing with the junior players. They're obviously learning how to be adults at the same time of trying to be, you know, the best hockey player that they can. And it's difficult. I mean, you there yourself. How do you as a coach, how can you balance the pressure you put on them to become a better hockey player to kind of understanding and helping them navigate that world of being a dumb teenager?
Well, at the end of the day, as a coach, we're dedicated to developing people. You know, this has become, and even in the last 10 years, I've seen firsthand the growth in the game from being a very execution-based, now transitioning over to more of a relationship-based ideology, excuse me. I find now that it's more important, you know, I'll cross-reference the start of my season here as a new coach for the second time with the Tri-City Americans organization. I spent a lot more time talking to the guys, getting to know them, getting to know where they're from, getting to know what their parents did, more so than I spent coaching them the X's and O's. You know, as a young kid, you know, where we are as a franchise, we're in Washington State. You know, a lot of these guys are from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Like, they're coming far distances away from home. So I believe, and I wanted to take it upon myself, and Stu Barnes and Jody Hall, the other coaches that I'm working with here, have done a really good job of just saying, hey, no matter what happens this season, we're going to be here for you because we know who you are. You know, we've established that rapport that, you know, we're taking care of people and we'll take care of the hockey player after. We want to make sure you guys are comfortable. You guys are in an environment where you fully believe that you're going to play at your very best, but you're also going to grow. We put a lot of opportunity for our team to spend some time together, you know, whether it's at the rink or away from the rink, that we do some team building activities as well. But we just want to make sure that they're coming into a place that they can refer to as their second home. So I believe that that is the basis of all structure, whether structure, culture, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that the relationship aspect of things is just so important.
And so with the NHL changing so much, and obviously that trickles down all the way down to even junior leagues and lower than that, talk to us about the coaching culture, excuse me, because we just saw the other day Alan Walsh, the NHL agent, make a statement about his client, I would assume, and kind of calling for the head of Sutter and saying that, you know, with the negativity that he puts on it, and on the players, that it can be hard to enjoy what you're doing now. And with that, he may not get the effort that they want from him. We're talking about Calgary here. And, you know, even the attitude that he had, I know like a few weeks ago when they had mentioned one of their top prospects that had made the jump up, and they're asking about his game, and he had said, who, what number was he? You know, so that kind of like distant coaching, that hard style, do you see those kind of coaches in that style really filtering out? Now, I know that they're still being recycled in the NHL level and stuff, but you're definitely taking a much more progressive, modern approach to what you need to do to develop these players now. Do you think that style is really running loose?
Well, that's hard, man. You're asking him to like talk smack about the Calgary Flames coach. I'm not sure I'd want to answer that.
Not necessarily that, but just the style of coaching.
You know, as I'll just talk about Calgary in a sense, as I grew up there. I went to Flames games all my life, and I still cheer for them so deeply. You know, that city has a lot of passion. And it's, you know, even as myself, I think even on my Twitter bio, I say I'm a proud Calgarian, and with that comes a lot. And I love the Flames organization very dearly. And I know that, you know, it appears that they have some things to sort out after what appears to be a down season over seasons past. But the one thing I'll say about coaching is I believe that teams have their needs. And I believe that, especially at the NHL level, everyone has a reason for doing things. And, you know, in the NHL, unfortunately, you have such a short leash for trial and error. I believe that nowadays, sometimes if you make a mistake or you might say the wrong thing, that leash is tugged on pretty tightly and rather quickly. I just believe that, you know, everyone has the intention of doing things for the right reasons, and whether it works or not, then it's okay to hit the reset button, maybe go back to the drawing board and find a new plan of attack and try and progress from there.
So at what point, and I know you're in a difficult spot now because you're dealing with younger players, and I guess maybe this would be directed more maybe the East Coast or American League. A lot of things, you've got your formula, you've got your structure, your program you're doing, you want the players to buy into the system. But at what point can it become too much X's and O's, and is so much constraint on players or certain players, types of players, that maybe the coach needs to let go and let the players' hockey IQ take over? Or is that really a tight rope, you know, to pull on, where it's always a give and take?
Yeah, and I think finding the common ground there would just to be create habits and concepts within your structure. And from there, whether, let's just say you go with the common one of pressure, support, and more support. So let's say from an offensive tactic, you want to pressure the puck, you want to support the puck, and then you want to support the guy that's supporting the puck. So let's just say you introduce that concept into your training camp, or even you reintroduce that concept at the midway point of your season. You take that concept and that framework and you instill it in your practices, and you run your offensive zone set. So you might run your forecheck and you see how the players react to it. And from there, you as a coach can kind of put your finishing touches on it within the structure of, okay, I love that you pressured like this. Let's pressure like this. And maybe let's make this little adjustment so that our support guy can get the puck this way. Or if you're pressuring this way, then okay, you're going to get the puck and then it's on. I think sometimes we as coaches can overthink the game a little bit, but at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, players are the ones that are executing. Players are the ones that are putting the puck in the net. Players are the ones that are running the routes. So if you can give them the tools and the guidelines, like the habits, the concepts, they should take over the rest of the way.
Right. So when you're recruiting a prospective player, of course, you want to have everything, all the boxes checked. You want him to be, whatever the position requires, if it's fast, agility, if it's puck control, puck possession, whatever the case may be. But one of the things that might be overlooked sometimes, because some players are so talented, is competitiveness. That mindset to compete, and not to be aggressive, but to compete. Does that competition personality, or whatever you call it, dynamic, can that make up for, say, someone that isn't protecting the puck too well, or meaning one of those boxes aren't checked, but the competitiveness, the passion can help? Or is it nowadays everything's got to be checked?
No, I believe competitiveness goes along with two words of sacrifice and character. Those that are going to be relentless in their pursuit of success, but also rather their pursuit of getting better. I believe that players that are willing to compete in every single situation not only make themselves better, but they make everyone else better. You oftentimes cannot teach competitiveness to some, but competitiveness is still contagious, that it can bring people up and empower them to respond in a positive way, maybe differently. Maybe they might have a boost of morale or a boost of energy, and they might substitute their quote unquote competitiveness, compete, physicality, whatever word you want to use, with a skill play or a hard back check or a block shot. Or I know block shots oftentimes relate to competitiveness, but competitiveness is a contagious thing that boosts energy. So I think someone who has that, I think, is a really important piece to your team, because they can build and bring up so many of those around them.
So goaltending, and I know it's something you might not deal with too much. I only bring this up, and I know they have goaltending coaches and everything else, but it seems like when we've talked to former players and former goalies, right, Andrew, they talk about when they played anywhere from 10 years ago to 40 years ago. We've talked to goalies. They kind of say, coach never says anything to me. Is that changed? Is it kind of like still leave the goalie alone? They're weird, but I mean, like, the coach is like, I don't know what to say.
What are you going to say to him?
Just stop the puck, right?
Stop it.
Yeah, I mean, or is it now that coaches are supposed to have a working knowledge, at least, of goaltending?
As I'm sure you've heard many times, a lot of coaches confess they're not goalie gurus. Our goalie coach, Ty Rimmer, does a great job with our guys. I mean, he comes in once a month to work with our goalies. But for us, with Stu and Jody, myself, we put a lot of time or a little bit of discussion on talking with our goalies, making sure we know how they're feeling, making sure they're getting the reps and the drills that they need work on. And for us, it's also a matter of, they're in control of what they want to get. For us, we just want to make sure we have an open dialogue. And for us, we oftentimes will open up that little bit of vulnerability. We'll ask the question, okay, what did you see here on this puck touch? What did you see on this save? How can we understand where you're perceiving it? We don't claim to be experts, but we feel as though we have some general knowledge. So we'll ask the question about stick positioning, or even where you are in your crease or your movements. And if they have an answer to substitute it, or maybe they often say, I didn't see it that way. That's an interesting perspective. It just, again, opens that dialogue that, we're all learning from.
And so let's now fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about your new job now. You're returning to Tri-City Americans this season. this time as associate coach. First question though, is there a difference between associate and assistant coach?
You know,
I
not
see this all
really.
the time. The differences. I'm like, what is the difference?
No, not really. I think it's a matter of just the title. You know, at the end of the day, I'm still an assistant coach, and I'll take the associate tag. Don't get me wrong, but it's no different.
So what are you in charge of currently?
Yeah, so I oversee a lot of the video and the 5-on-5 pre-scouting. I work with Stu Barnes, our head coach, on the power play, and I oversee a lot of the skill development with our players with both the forwards and the D. But for us, we're really fortunate here that, you know, we're all tied into everything together. We're just one rather fluid staff. And one day Jody will take the forwards, I'll take the D, and we can switch. There's really no set role and responsibility. Now, as the younger guy, I am the token IT guy and the guy that can solve all the problems of my experience in video. You know, I do solve all the issues and, you know, all of that stuff. But, you know, a lot of it is forward based and working with those guys and trying to, you know, get them better.
That's funny.
So as pro players that are working up in the minor pro circuits, we hear a lot that, you know, during the summer, you don't get paid. You sometimes have to go and get another job. Are you doing anything during off seasons? Because I feel like coaches don't take breaks or they're not supposed to. So do you do any coaching during the off season?
Are you busier during the off season?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the last couple of years, I mean, I've been fortunate to have been, you know, employed full time by the team. So I've made my team my job in the summertime by looking at old tape, getting in touch with players. You know, last summer I was running the summer skates with the Maple Leaf organization. So I was right in Toronto up until I moved over here into Tri-Cities. And the year before that was COVID. So, you know, I mean, I spent, you know, we're always trying to find ways to get better as a group. And for me, I'm going to undertake some projects and try and find out more ways to score goals and look to defend. I'll probably look to get in touch with some old players of mine and see if there's some summer skates that could be ran in Calgary, because I don't really want to be off my skates for that long. But for me, you know, everyone does need a break, whether they say it or not. You know,
Yeah.
I think burnout is becoming increasingly apparent in coaches in some aspect. And, you know,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we're people too. We need to hit the reset button from time to time. We might need to go grab our golf clubs and hit the links for a week, or, you know, at least just get out, see our families, get out in the sun. So maybe a little bit of a break, some downtime, but won't be too far away from the video for long.
So coaches that we've talked to, and most have actually been collegiate coaches, Andrew, I think. And one of the problems that they talk about, and we'd like to get your perspective, is young people today, with the reliance on their smartphones and the lack of communication, meaning young people today really, you know, may lack just basic communication skills. They're so used to being on their phones. That's how they communicate. It's text groups. And, you know, we've even had, we won't mention the name, but one of the coaches, he's more of my age in his 50s. And, you know, his response was, you know, the play broke down because they weren't talking to each other. And, you know, his response was, well, maybe you guys should text each other next time. You know, that type of thing was one of his funny stories. But do you see that? And if so, how do you deal with like a new generation that really has to communicate in a different way than in the past?
Yeah, I mean, you have to get creative, I think. I mean, I do see it. I think it's apparent that the communication skills are just different. You know, I'll talk a little bit about the past and how we've done things. Is like when I was in Bonnyville, for example, we had noticed that was a little bit of a trend with our players. So we instilled within our team building aspect, we did a little bit of public speaking. Hi, my name is TJ. I'm from Calgary. Here's 2 truths and maybe 1 lie, and call me out, or maybe it's a little bit of a story time. But we want to put our players in a position of a little bit of being uncomfortable speaking, you know, because when they get in the real world, whether they become teachers or businessmen or whatever the case may be, they have to public speak and they have to be comfortable in those situations. So we want to try and have our players interact with one another as possible. And when I'm dealing with a player, I'd much rather call them and have that conversation if they're away versus texting them. Yeah. But at the same time, for us as coaches, we have to remain fluid and we have to adapt as well. And oftentimes it very well may be that we do have to socialize with our players via text, or they communicate with players via text. Like, I do know that there are some teams in our league that as opposed to pre-scouting as a team, they'll actually send the team the video and they'll review it on their phones on the bus. And that opens for a potential conversation later, or there may not be any conversation at all. So you can use social media and the way the phones work as a tool for coaching. But at the end of the day, I believe personally that it's important to have those conversations and to put them in situations where they have to chat.
Yeah, the question is, though, using all that technology, can you get it past a coach who's my age? Or like Stu. Stu's probably my age or a little bit older.
Yeah, sometimes I think that's why he
Let him
hired me, is
text.
because I get to help him.
What's
That's funny.
text?
Yeah.
So dealing with player agents, and I know there's rules and stipulations when they're young, and maybe they're not agents, they're advisors or whatever. Is that becoming more prevalent, do you think? Do you and the coaching staff have to deal more with that, or is that still sort of at the junior level, you're not really dealing with too much of that?
I would find, at least here, our general manager, Bob Torrey, does a really good job of establishing those relationships with the agents and the advisors. As an associate coach at this level, I'm not having a lot of those, conversations. But for us, we've got a strong scouting staff that is responsible for handling those and having discussions about the upcoming draft and players and their preferences as to where they want to play. So for us, we're pretty lucky that we don't have to deal with that a ton right now. But in my past experiences, it's no different than anyone else when you're recruiting. It's just having open and honest conversations, and the advisors are looking out for the best interests of their players. And for us, we want to make sure we're doing our part to answer any questions that they have. And whether it's in season, I've always been a transparent person and a transparent coach, that it's a matter of anything you guys want to know, we're more than willing to have the conversation and go from there.
So tough question. Player isn't, and I guess let's maybe make this pros, not junior. So pros bit different, right? Playing to support families, grown men here. So either East Coast American League, I would assume NHL, you're not having too much of a conversation, and just talk about what maybe your experiences, what you've seen, what you've done. But players not doing what you need them to do. So you sit them down, you give them time, you explain either the role or what they're doing wrong, what you expect over the next, and depending upon what it is, how much time you give them to make those corrections. And you want to give them the support to go, we believe in you, we're here for you. But there's also that line of, okay, it's not working. How does a coach come to that point?
It's an interesting question.
We only know it because we talk to coaches.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's all we get is our questions based on what we hear.
Yeah.
But that's kind of an important thing. Like, how much time, when do you call it and say this is just not working?
I think it's entirely situational. I want to say an average of, at that level, expectations and results are so critical. I believe you got a pretty short window. I want to say it's 2 games, 3 games to sort it out, maybe, and that's probably even pushing it. But as far as the decision making within my role last year, I wasn't really involved in those conversations and anything like that. But from this level, it's all about accountability. And at the pro level, I believe that one thing you should never question is a player's work ethic. And oftentimes a work ethic is never in question because, as you mentioned, it's their job. They're working to provide for themselves, for their families. And it's really interesting. A guy I was working with put a thought into my head when I first started my position last year. He says, it's going to be really interesting for you to start watching puck battles. You take into consideration a young player who might be just coming in on his entry-level contract versus a 28, 29-year-old American League call-up player, and who's going to battle for that puck. He says you've got a player who is just learning how to be a pro versus a player who is a pro, who's an established professional, who is of the mindset that they will do everything in their power to win that and recover that puck battle because they know that that's going to assist their overall quality of life and their family's quality of life. And it really opened my eyes towards the execution and the overall willingness to compete at that level. So when things like that, if it comes to a head with a certain player, I firmly believe that the context of the expectation and the accountability part is so huge that once it gets to that point, if there isn't anything done to remedy it, then the writing very well may be on the wall.
And it's interesting because, I always think about, the way that you talk to players, like let's say along the lines of what my father was saying, if they're messing up, if they're not doing well, when you sit down and talk to players, when you're comparing it in the ECHL, AHL, the pros that have done this, that have families to feed versus just young kids, I assume when you sit down and have the conversations with them, it's much different than when you have a conversation with the younger kids, right? Like, how do you talk to a grown man that he knows he's screwed up, he knows he's probably going to get dropped down, take a pay cut or whatever? How do you talk to them, whether it's like, hey man, you need to do this better, or a pep talk like, hey, it's going to be okay, work hard to get better?
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, how do you
balance
communicate
the two? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me personally, I mean, I don't differ away from anything that I've done or how I've approached talking to players in the past. I mean, for me, I'm just such a believer in the relationship and the building people up component, whether it's, or even a level of vulnerability, as I mentioned before. Help me help you. What can I do for you to get over this hump, to get over this little slump? Here's some clips that I'm seeing. Here's things that we can do to fix this. I'd love your input and see what you're seeing, and then maybe we can come to a conclusion. For me, I'm not one to bring the hammer down on anybody for any reason. I'm a matter of, it's important for me to come to some kind of mutual agreement or some reasoning. I'm not at that level where I'm a head coach and I have to be firm and overly decisive with my decision making, but I'm trying to give the players the benefit of the doubt to help them get out of whatever it is it may be.
So I only have two more questions, Andrew, and one isn't mine. So somebody sent this question to us that they want to know about coaching, and I guess it's somebody that is looking to get into coaching. I'm not sure at what level, but obviously like a paid gig. And they would say, what is like a coaching interview like? Like what, is it similar to like the questions we're asking? Or, I mean, what is it like to be like in an interview for an associate coaching position?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few, and they've ranged anywhere from build a 90-minute practice plan with this concept, and let's discuss the teaching points and the key points of the drill, and then let's see how it is, to the point of talking about overall philosophy, to as much as a video presentation. For me, I just think inside the interview piece, it's important to just be prepared. Be prepared, but be open to any opportunity that may present itself. And whether it's a simple conversation, whether it's something as doctoring up a practice plan, I find that they're all different. I've never had an interview that's been the same. There's always been some kind of nuance that's been different, but be open and ready for anything.
And isn't there, and I think you've mentioned it, and you're certainly wouldn't be the first one to say this that we've talked to, that sometimes your first foray into coaching is sort of like a non-paid volunteer, whatever type position. I mean, we've talked it all the way from Mark Strobel, who was out at teaching out at Wisconsin, all the way to Jeff Toohey, who was general manager, up there in
the junior leagues.
Yeah, the major junior up in Canada. I can't remember what. Oh, he's going to be mad if he's listening to this because I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, they all started out like in volunteer positions. So it kind of seems like if you're looking to getting into coaching, it isn't like you're going to just start off at like a position you're thinking you are. It's going to be, and I think you said it like sort of, yeah, you're going to have to do some interning or some volunteering, and then that develops when you develop. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said, with being ready and open to anything. I mean, it's, a lot of us as coaches, we're very fortunate to be able to say that this is our full-time occupation, but a lot of us did start there, and it's a matter of, when I look at my opportunity to go to Finland, I believe there's something that coaches have to do to get their foot in the door. Once you do have that foot in the door, the opportunity is yours, and it's up to you to, seize that opportunity to advance and go from there. I think, there are a lot of coaches in hockey currently that transition from playing into coaching or from studying into coaching, but there are a lot of us as well that have to start, whether it's quote unquote at the bottom or whatever it may be, but all you have to do is start. Give yourself a chance, and you never know what you could accomplish inside your coaching. It's just important to begin. If you're passionate about it, then dive in head first.
Well, I just have one more question for you, and we'll get a little personal with this one. So obviously, everybody's goal, whether it's player or coach, would probably be to go to the NHL, right? The big money, you got the biggest league, the most talented players in the world. But for you personally, other than maybe getting up to the NHL level, what are your goals as a coach? Do you want to eventually find whether it's a team in the WHL, AHL, just to have a team you stay with for a while? Is it to keep hopping back and forth? What are your goals?
No, for me, I want to continue along my path and coach at the highest level that I can. You know, I have had opportunities to explore the head coaching role myself over the last couple of years, but for me, I felt, you know, being in the position that I'm in currently, I think it's a great spot for myself. Moving forward, I believe that, you know, being a head coach is something that I would like to go and try and see what I'm all about. I think I'm ready for that step, but it's a matter of the right opportunity and the right time for myself. You know, I'm not going to be in a rush to dive into an opportunity that may not be the right fit for me. But right now in Tri-Cities, I believe that we've got a really good thing going. And if the opportunity presents itself to go back to the professional ranks, you know, the Toronto Maple Leaf organization showed me what pro hockey is really all about. And, you know, I loved it. If it does have an opportunity to return, then I would most certainly welcome it. But by no means am I in a rush, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
My last question is there sort of an unwritten rule, or not rule, but maybe unwritten philosophy where, I mean, you've learned so much as a coach already and still learning and developing and doing all those skills necessary to be, you know, the best you can be. You're not an intern. I mean, you got a gig. So it's not like it's their job meeting the head coaches or other coaches, but is there still like an unwritten philosophy of they're still kind of mentoring you or coaching you along the way? Or is it more like, no, there's none of that. It's me kind of observing and picking up stuff?
No, it's all about mentorship. And I've been extremely lucky to work with the head coaches that I've worked with, and they've all given me so much. I've taken a little piece of them from every year that I've been with them, whether it was Rick Swan in Bonnyville or Sheldon Keefe, Greg Moore, Eric Wellwood, you know, the list goes on and on. But, you know, and I'm really fortunate working with Stu. I mean, Stu played 1,200 games in the NHL as a player. He had an opportunity to coach there. So he's worn both hats at that level. And now he's come here in his second season as a head coach. He's brought Jody and I in for the first year here, and he's sharing his knowledge. You know, Jody Hall himself, he was a coach in the Ontario League for 18 years. So it's constant information and sharing and new opinions and new ideas. And, you know, I've never been in a situation where I haven't felt like I wasn't able to learn from someone. And these coaches that I've been with, they've all been forthcoming with their efforts to make me better. And I hope that if I am in a head coaching position, that I will do the exact same if I'm presented the opportunity. So it's all about sharing. Everyone wants to see everyone succeed. We're this coaching community here is so strong. And even those that I haven't worked with, I find that there are a lot of coaches that, you know, will reach out and ask questions. The next thing you know, I've got a new friend that I'm talking about Nutrizone regroups with on the phone every Wednesday night kind of thing. That it's a special game. It's a special group of people and coaches that we get to be a part of all the time. And, you know, just fortunate to be here and fortunate to learn.
Well, we can't thank you enough for your time, man. This has been a great interview. Actually, I've learned a ton.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for your time today,
thank
man.
you so much.
Appreciate you.
And we wish you well. We'll, you know, certainly follow your career. And we always say this with coaches that are look like they have a bright future. Hey, if you get a head job, you know, wherever, just remember it was Jim and Andrew that had you on the podcast.
So yeah, absolutely, guys. Don't worry. If we're ever in the same area, I'll make sure to look you guys up. But yeah, make sure tickets will be at will call for you guys. Thank you guys so much for your consideration and the last hour of you guys' time. I appreciate the work you guys do, and you know, this is what it's all about: having conversations, talking hockey, and sharing knowledge. So thank you guys very much. It's great what you guys are doing.
Thank you, man.
Man, he's going to have a heck of a career.
Absolutely.
Interesting to talk to another up and coming coach. I mean, you know, young guy. I don't want to say he's young because he's, you know, but he's 30s.
Yeah.
And that's a young guy to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, you know, we said at the end, two very insightful answers. You know, we've had, you know, any coach that we've had on here, whether it's assistant, head, whatever, they've all been great, but it's just good when you can get down to the really nitty gritty details. And some of them come from our questions too, man. I'm sure that they don't want to talk about X's and O's or think, well, you know, we'd care to hear it, but we were trying to take that background information out and really get into the coaching stuff.
It is. So it's going to be interesting to follow this guy's career.
Yep.
And another good contact for us. And again, the hockey world is small, and we hope to follow all these guys.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Appreciate y'all.
Bye-bye.